Hi, Figgy.
Hi, how are you?
Hashem, how was your Pesach?
So nice. It was so nice to have everybody together.
So beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure for you too, that was the best part.
Yeah, it was the best. It's so just heartwarming seeing everybody talk together, play together, laugh together,
Right.
Nice. Really, really nice. Thank God. Thank God.
Right, thank God. Oh, Susie, if you're free Wednesday morning, Rabbi Siegelman is giving a shiur for women at 10:30, and I'm sponsoring it for the yard sites that I have this month for ER.
I wish I could go, but unfortunately I have work.
You have work.
10 o'clock.
Okay.
I'm still working, but I may not be. So, like in a year and a half.
Oh, really? Okay.
Gotta stop sometime, but yeah, I wish I could, but thank you. So
Yeah.
it's at Shul? It's at Shul.
It's actual, yeah. He's starting a monthly shiur for women.
That's so nice. At 10
Yeah.
o'clock on Wednesdays?
10:30.
On what subject is there?
He's gonna base it on the parsha,
That's nice.
on Kadoshim and living up to your potential. So,
Nice. Wow. Very nice. Hi.
Hi.
Mario, how are you? Welcome back.
Thank you.
Where did Mario go?
Bienvenido.
Eh?
¿Dónde fuiste?
Hello.
Hi.
Talia.
I should say bonvenuto, right? Bonvenuto. I should say bonvenuto.
To who? Everybody
Benvenuto.
speaking
Bonvenuto.
Italian.
Oh, he went to Italy. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have a good time?
Yeah, great.
Faggy, you had a good time?
Very nice. And you?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Barbara, where did you go?
We were in Israel.
Now, you always go to Israel.
Oh, you were in Israel?
No. I said you always go to Israel.
Not for Pesach. Not for Pesach.
Mm. Hi, Harold.
Hello.
Hi, Harold.
Hey.
Hi.
Mario, where did you go for Pesach?
Stayed home.
Rimini.
Where?
Rimini.
Italy.
Rimini.
Oh, nice.
Rimini. Ah.
So that was very exotic.
Hi, Magda.
Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
It's been a while.
What are we holding?
We're on Perek Hay, Shmuel Bay's Perek Hay,
Hey.
Pasuk Vav. Pasuk
Vav?
Oh, exactly. There we go.
Chapter 5.
Pasuk Vav.
Oh, Ernie, can I dedicate the shiur to my grandfather? His yard site is Hay ER.
Absolutely, you can. This was
My father's father,
your father's father.
who was a shochet here in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Summers.
Sudnovsky,
Huh?
because my father changed his name. So it's
What was the name?
Yitzchak ben Yaakov.
What was his last name?
Sudnovsky,
Sunovsky.
yeah.
Yeah, that pen.
Thank you.
Okay, it's
Thank
the shiur tonight should be the Zecher of Feigi's grandfather.
Thank you.
This is a little bit of a review. We're going to tackle some other things that we didn't discuss last time. So David HaMelech has been anointed king over all of Israel. Vayelech HaMelech v'anashav Yerushalayim. So the first thing David HaMelech does after being anointed king, he recognizes that parts of Yerushalayim has not been captured. That's going to be his first job, to basically create a capital city, which will be from where he will rule. Right? Vayelech HaMelech v'anashav Yerushalayim. El HaYevusi Yoshev Haaretz. And the Yevusi, we'll see what that means, are dwelling there. Vayomer David lemor lo tavohena. The Yevusi say to David, don't come here. Ki im hesircha ha'ivrim va'pischim lemor. You shall not enter here unless you remove the blind and the lame. And Iver is blind, Pisech is the lame. Lemor, who say lo yavo David hena. It's a very strange pasuk. So, first of all, there were other areas in Yoshua and Shoftim, if you remember, that the Jewish people had not conquered. So why is David treating Yerushalayim differently? Why is he going to Yerushalayim first? Number one, David HaMelech is born in Beit Lechem, which is close. So he knows the city. And perhaps it bothered him that they had never thrown out the Yevusi from there. The Radak says, first of all, the Radak note, by the way, throughout this perek, we're going to see analogies made between what's written here and what's written in Divrei Hayomim, perek Yud Aleph. Because Divrei Hayomim also goes through some of the history of David HaMelech. But the Meforshim take up sort of the differences between what's written there, what's written here. So for example, the Radak points out that here it says, Vayelech HaMelech v'anoshav, David and his people. In Divrei Hayomim it says, Vayelech David v'chol Yisrael. And the Radak says, Ki chol Yisrael hayu ata nashav, because really, all of the Jewish people are his subjects. The Kivan Shemalach al Kol Yisrael. So now he is now, for the first time, king over all of the Israelites. Halach el Yerushalayim l'kod mitzudat Zion. There is a tower called Mitzudat Zion. Lefisha hayta Kabbalah etzlam ki Zion rosh mamlechet Yisrael. There was a Kabbalah that Zion is going to be the capital city. And the person who will succeed at conquering it will be the one that is melech on all of Israel. Shaul never achieved malchus over all of Klal Yisrael. Now the Malbim takes a little different approach. He says, "Achar she'atay tachdu shnei mamlachot Yisrael, shayu atah shevet Yudah tachat David, v'yeter shvatim uBinyamin shevet Shaul b'rosham tachat Ishboshet." The Malbim focuses on the territorial location of Yerushalayim, not on the way the Radak is learning that it was going to be the spiritual center or the political center through Kabbalah. The Malbim learns very practically. David was ruling over Yehuda. Binyamin was Shaul's tribe, who was leading the rest of Israel. V'shavu kulam l'malchus achas tachas David. Now they're all under David. Hayim min ha'etzav v'chen ofir etzel Hashem she'ir ha'mlucha tiyeh b'gvul ha'shayach l'shnei hashvatim. Yerushalayim happens to be the city that neighbors both Shevet Binyamin and Shevet Yehuda. Shayu shiftei malchus v'zeh Yerushalayim shayta chatzil Yehuda v'chatzil Binyamin. Like it says, there was the Chazal in Yuma say, Ritzu hayta yotza mechelko shel Yehuda lechelko shel Binyamin ubo mizbech banui. That there was a special, even the Makam HaMikdash is made up of both Binyamin and Yehuda, because it had to be. Binyamin was the only brother not involved in the sale of Yosef. So they say that's why the Mizbeach is built on that location, because for Kapora you need someone other than the 10 Shvatim that were involved in the sale of Yosef. Okay, so that's the issue about this capital city.
What parak are we on, please?
I'm sorry, Perek Vav. Perek
Okay.
Vav, Pasuk Vav.
Oh,
Shmuel, I'm sorry.
Perek.
Perek
Hey,
Hey.
Perek Hey.
Perek Hey,
Pasuk
Pasuk
Vav.
Vav.
Pasuk Vav. Mhm.
Now, Rashi goes through, let's read the Ralbag. Lo yachol David lahotzia misham bavur shvuat Avraham Avimelech. Way back in Avraham's time, he and Avimelech made a bris that Linini ulenechdi, which is 4 generations, that Avram swore to Avimelech that they would leave them alone. And we're going to see that the Yevusi are not the people, the Sheva Ha'amim of the Yevusi. They already were chased away. And the people who moved to Yerushalayim were the generation of Avimelech, who were the Plishtim. They had 2 idols, 2 tzlomim, made up of a blind person and a lame person. Now, this is supposed to be a symbol. Who's the blind ancestor? Yitzchak. And who's the lame ancestor? Yaakov.
Okay.
As the Radak says, this is to remind them, Laharot al Brit Yitzchak shebesof yamav kohen of maros. The Torah tells us at the end of Yitzchak's life, he couldn't see well. V'apisech bavur Yaakov shayot solem al yirecho, because of the Gid Anoshe, he was a lame. V'asu zeh loharot shekvar nishtalish lem zeh britim avot bichlalam, that they had made a brit with their grandfather Avram. Ulazot hasiba amar haYevusi leDavid, don't come here. We have not removed these tzlamim. This reminds us of the bris, and the time of the bris has not come to be abolished.
Ernie, I saw also a reference that in the next generation by Yitzchak. Do you remember in Bereshit it said Avimelech Melech Goror and Pichol Sartzeva come
Yeah.
to encounter him after the Philistines kept filling up the wells that Yitzchak's servants had dug, and they were so Yitzchak went somewhere else, and then he was successful, and because of that, Avimelech, or the next generation of king named Avimelech, came and made a treaty or made this bris with Yitzchak.
Correct. It continued in the next generation
Yes.
when they built those be'erot.
Correct.
Now, by the way, when we say in Hallel, Einayim lahem v'lo yiru, Oznayim lahem v'lo yishma'u, Ragleim lo yalechud refers to these tzlamim that were in Yerushalayim, that the Yevusi reminded David, oh, you can't come and conquer us because of the bris that we had. There's another Rashi in Divrei Hayomim. I'm going to read it to you because it's very interesting. Vayomer David lemor lo tavo heina, ki mesercha evrim v'apischim lemor lo yavo David heina. Re'u, says Rashi, shelo yuchlu lamod lifnei David. They couldn't stand before David's army. V'natnu ivrim u'pischim lifnei shara ir lemor. They placed models of blind and lame at the gates of the sea to say, Lo yavo David heina ki milachem im'ivrim alalu. It was like to embarrass David. Who is David going to fight? Blind people. Some say that they actually put blind and lame people there, that it would be embarrassing to the king that that's who he's fighting. And based on that, they would turn around and not fight them. Says Rashi over there in Divrei Hayomim, the David Omer Belibo, emethu kilo nachon v'hagun li lilachem im ivrim v'pischim. He agreed. It's not really to my covet for me to fight against blind and lame. Ach kol mishi yakei Yevusi hech sheyiga b'tzinor v'imshachem v'ashechem misham ivrim he still told his soldiers, whoever reaches the Tsinor, which we're going to see is like the main defense of the city, he's going to promise them great leadership. Now, the Musar Navim says a very interesting ha'ara. Mizeh nireh, for a Jewish army, אי-אפשר לצאת במלחמה עם באנשים שאפשר להם להתייצב כנגדם ולהילחם עמהם. It is correct to go out into battle against an army that can defend itself. אך מי שאי-אפשר להם להגן על נפשם. But to go out to battle people who can't defend themselves, אי-אפשר להתנפל עליהם, כי יש בזה עניין של רציחה ושפיכת דמים. That's considered murder. ולכן אי אפשר היה לדוד להילחם מן העברים והפסחים. משום שאי אפשר להם להגן על נפשם, because of this halachic sort of prohibition. וזה היה החטא של עמלק, שיצא להילחם בבני ישראל בעת שהיו עייפים וגאים, ואי אפשר היה להם להגן על נפשם. When we left Mitzrayim, and it says that Amalek attacked us and we were weak and weary. That's a chet of Amalek, because when there are rules to war as well, and when you fight a war, you've got to fight a war against an equal or somewhat equal foe. Of course, we see what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. They're really acting like Amalek as well. They're attacking, not necessarily the same kind of army.
So it's would you say that's the origin of not attacking civilians here in the Torah?
The Torah,
I don't know any other.
The Torah is saying that it's murder if you go and attack people that cannot defend themselves. Now, we're not going to get into the firebombing of Dresden and the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. That's not for this year. Although I could say a lot about it. That also saved millions of lives. Certainly the atomic bombing saved an invasion of Japan, which would have lost 500,000 to 1 million American casualties and maybe 10 times as many Japanese casualties, based on what was going on in Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal and Okinawa, and the way, the Japanese were not surrendering. So that was a whole different thing. And they had to be shocked and awed, basically, into surrendering, which is what they did. So, but again, that's not a Jewish army. This is David HaMelech and his army.
That's because the Japanese leadership had the same mentality as Putin. I'm not giving up no matter what.
Yeah, but Bernie, Russians, let me just make the argument. Yeah, let me make the argument that German soldiers surrendered to the American army by the hundreds of thousands. Mm-hmm. Russians also surrendered to German armies. Millions of Russians, they ended up dying in prison camps, etc. But the Japanese had a code, the Bushido Code, which prevented them from surrendering.
They looked at the emperor as a deity. They were fighting for a deity.
They had to be burnt out of caves, person by person, because they did not surrender. It's astounding. There were 20,000, there were like 80,000 Japanese deaths in Okinawa, and 5 prisoners. But no other. So the Japanese story is a different story, because it would have led to tremendous casualties by the people fighting them. But let me continue reading what the Musar Nevi'im said about this thing. He goes, what is David doing now, right away in Yerushalayim? He goes through that same approach of the Malbim. He very much wanted unification. And the two tribes that were the most at odds at that time was Binyamin versus Yehuda. Now, later on, it became Ephraim. which is another Yosef child. But at this time, because Shaul HaMelech had been the king from Binyamin, the rivalry was then. Ki hu chashav shemachuso yeshutafut me'elo shvatim. Ki av shehu mibnei Yehuda val dato hayta shemalchut Yerushalmi lo mishaul. No. Remember, he was married to Shaul's daughter. So he saw his kingship as sort of a union between Shevet, Binyamin, and Yehuda. Ki mishol ari lo nishar banim. Shaul didn't have sons. She'urilu malchus. Ki Mepiboshet was the grandson. Shaya ben Yonasan Arayu nechas rakli was lame. Shelo haya roy lemalchus. V'nishar yoresh hayechidi shel Beit Shaul. David, by being the son-in-law, was the last heir of Beit Shaul. V'lachein ratzah livnot et ira bira shelo b'makom shechaber nachlat shnei hashvatim ha'elu biyachad. Yerushalayim was the place that he thought could unify Binyamin and Yehuda. V'chein be'emet ga Beit HaMikdash haya nivneh al chalkal shel Binyamin v'Yehuda, like we read in Masechta Yuma. Okay, I wanted to bring that out as well. So Pasuk Zayin, Vayelkod David et Mitzudat Sion, he ir David. So he saw that he couldn't attack from the front, the gate, because there were either because there were blind or lame people there, or because we'll see there was Avodah Zarah there. So he went where there was a tower called Mitzudat Sion. After he conquered it, and he conquered it by himself, it became known as Ir David. So let me just make sure there's nothing I wanted to say here. Let's read the next pasuk. Vayomer David, Vayomahu, Kol Makei Yevusi, whoever strikes the Yevusi v'yigabat sinor and reaches let's call it a pipe, v'tapischim v'ta'ivrim, and is able to conquer these slumim, snuei nefesh David, that David hated, al ken yomru iver pisech lo yavol habayit. Then it became like a minig that an iver pisech wouldn't visit the palace, although the before Shem say David HaMelech, of course, did allow as gemilos chesed if people had to come in. But the tzinor is, for example, the place that the city drew its water from. And therefore, the Ralbag learns that by conquering the water source, that's how they would conquer the city. He had to destroy these slamim to show that the shvuah that was made with Avram Avinu was already over. By the way, even during Bayit Sheni, there were areas that the Chashmonaim could not conquer inside certain fortresses in Yerushalayim. That's what the Steinzal says. So the Rashi Radak say that the Iver and the Pisech refer to idols. Or it's pictures that represent, as we said, the Shvuah between Avram and Avimelech. Or they said, listen, we're going to even put blind people and lame people there, you won't be able to conquer it because they were overconfident. So David gives an incentive to his officers. Whoever conquers it, I will make the chief officer. Who ended up conquering it? Yoav ben Tzruya, his nephew. And that's how he became the chief of staff of David, by conquering this part of the Yevusit stronghold. That's what the Medrash Shoich Tov tells us, that it was Yoav. Let me read the following to everybody. That the Tzinor was the deep tunnel discovered by archaeologists, which the Yevusi had dug under the walls in order to gain access to the Gihon spring just outside the city walls. Some speculate that Warren's shaft, the shaft at the bottom of this tunnel, discovered by British officer Charles Warren in 1867, was part of the system, though it's unlikely that the shaft was connected to the tunnel in David's day. The tunnel dug by King Chizkiyahu many generations later as preparations for the looming Assyrian invasion was an extension improvement of this ancient water system. So Vayeshev David Pasuk Tes, Vayeshev David Bamtsuda. So he moved into this area. Vayikra la'ir David. Vayiven David Saviv min hamilo vavaita. And he built around. So what is the Milo? So some say it's a plaza, that it was around, it was still within the walls of the city, but around his palace. And people would gather there. It was part of the development of the city. Others say that a Milo is a moat, that they dug a surrounding like ditch and they filled it with water. And it was like a regular moat. Like what, castles in Europe had moats. But according to most Meforshim, it was a protective area. Yeah. Vayelech David haloch v'gadol. V'Hashem elokei tzvakos imo. David realizes that he's successful. But he attributes it to Hashem. Somebody who's haughty, that's an abomination to Hashem. It's pointed out by the Kli Yakar here that David's heart did not go up. And he pointed all of his success to Hashem Tzvakos.
Is this a similar language in the way Megillus Esther talks about Mordechai?
Very good, Ellen, because I was just going to say that I read that there's a medrash that says that only 4 people were zochet to be called the haloch v'gadol, or just the word gadol in it, because they had attained special status because of the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And those included Avraham, where it says, V'avarechach v'agad l'shemecha, Yehoshua, when he finally crosses the Yarden, the pasuk says, "Vayomahu Gidal Hashem es Yoshua be'enei kol Yisrael." Here in the pasuk with David HaMelech, and finally in Megillas Esther, where I went and looked for it, I think the pasuk is Vayomar HaMelech Manasa Yikar Gedula LaMordechai.
Oh, very good.
Thanks, Deb.
Outstanding.
Ew.
So that's a
It
message.
sounded,
Okay.
So I don't think it refers to haughtiness, Ernie. I think it
No,
really
it's the opposite. It's the opposite.
In God's eyes, these were they were
No,
special.
from David, he could, if somebody would not attribute his success to Hashem, he would be considered haughty, and that would be an abomination. But that did not happen to David. He was not lo gavalibo v'lo ramu einav, and therefore he attributed his success to HaKadosh Baruch Hu being behind him.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he's praised here. Kol kama sheDavid halach v'gadal gadla ha'itbatlut v'anava shelo l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Grew his anivus, and that's the kavanah of this pasuk. That even though it seems that David is growing higher and higher, still Hashem Elokei Tzvakos is imo.
Also, we see in the next few psukim how David repeatedly asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for guidance instead of acting on his own, as opposed to the way Shaul acted.
Let's continue. Yud Aleph. Vayishlach Hiram melech tzor malachim el David. Okay, Hiram, it's a name that we're going to see a lot. When are we're also going to see it with Shlomo HaMelech. There's a machlokes. Where is Tzor? So Tyre. So the basic understanding is Tyre is on the coast of Lebanon. And that's why Hiram eventually sends cedars of Lebanon both to David to help him build his palace, and to Shlomo HaMelech to build the Beis Hamikdash. He becomes an ally of Klal Yisrael. Who is this Hiram? We'll see in a minute. Vaishlach Hiram melech tzor malachim al David. Hiram, the king of Tyre, sent messengers. Vatzei arazim, cedars of Lebanon. V'charshe eitz, other pieces of wood. V'charshe even, kir, building materials made out of rock. Vayivnu bait David, and they built his palace. Some say in Divrei Hayomim, this story comes after next Perek Vav, which we're going to learn, God willing, next week, where David HaMelech tries to bring the Aron HaKodesh, which is not, we know where it is. It's been taken by the Plishtim, and it's been in different locations in Kiryat Yarim. So eventually, we're going to see next Perek, he's going to bring the Aron. And in Divrei Hayomim, this Hiram story happens after that. But here it happens before he brings the Aron.
How did you translate?
He thinks this is the way it should be.
How did you translate Chavrashai 8?
Carpenters.
Carpenters, right?
People who work with wood.
Or who work with wood. Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the Abarbanel says something very powerful. Ein matzinu, ein mukdam u'mucha b'Torah. We know, for example, when we read Chamisha Chumshei Torah, a lot of things happen, out of order. So we have a principle. Ein mukdam u'mucha b'Torah. Now, does that concept work by Nach as well? So the Maharsha says in Tainus that Benach ein mukdam u'mucha b'Torah. So it's something for us to recognize, that the same principle operates here as well. Now, so the standard is that Hiram is Melech Tyre. But in Breshis Rabbah, it says, Vayet ad ish adulami ushmo Hira. After Yehuda was involved in the sale of Yosef, there's a whole chapter of Yehuda v'Tamar. How does it begin? It says he goes down to Hira. He goes down to an Isha Dulami, and his name is Hira. By the way, Susie and I were Zoche in one of our trips with the Mizrahi. We ate in the field of Ishai of Adulami. We were with Rav Rimon, and he gave us a shiur there, so they know exactly where this area is. Say the Rabbanon hu Chira hu Chiram Shahaya b'mei David. This is the Say Hiram. But based on that, he's 1,200 years old. Because he's 500 years old. Because remember, there's been 400 years since Klal Yisrael has come into Canaan. There was 200 years that they were in Mitzrayim, and Yehuda's even before then, right? So, by the way, listen to what the Abarbanel, Dan Yitzchak Abarbanel, Susie and I were zocha to be in Granada, where the Abarbanel, who was an advisor to Ferdinand and Isabella, where he had a disputation with them. The Abarbanel eventually was allowed to leave, along with all the Jews, in 1492. And he went to Venice, the Abarbanel. In fact, Rabbi Bronner, alav shalom, would always tell me Venice was like a democratic city-state at the time. And Rabbi Bronner had always told me that the Abarbanel argued with the Rambam that the Abarbanel learned that Melech HaMashiach doesn't necessarily mean monarchy, but that it could mean democracy. And the Abarbanel gave examples of it, like the Venetian city-states. Interesting, because the Abarbanel says Tzur, Haniskar kan Eina Venitzia, Asher Anu Korim Hayom Tzur. Apparently, the Jews called Venice Tzur. V'lo hayagam kein Romi Harishosh Nikrat Tzur. They used to call Rome Tzur. Aval hayab Medina Gdola Smucha Yerushalayim. It was a big state near Jerusalem. Vagoyim Korem Ota B'Lshonam Tyre. V'hi kvar nechrevet hayom. So, V'hayom yesh ir sheshmo kein b'medinat Levanon al Sfat Hayam Samuch LeYisrael b'Tzafon. So the Abarbanel gives us a lot of different pshatim in the word tsar, tsur or tsar, whatever.
Wasn't there a disputation with, was it
That
the
disputation is between the
in Ju-
Ramban and Pablo Cristiani that occurred in the 1300s, 120 years before the Inquisition. But the
It was a
Abarbanel, Bernard and Isabella argue, the Don Yitzchak Abarbanel represented the Jewish people in 1492 in that era. So I didn't mean.
It was a disputation. Was it in Girona? Not
Yeah, it was in Girona.
in Girona. There's a
That's
disputation.
the
in Girona.
Ramban.
Ramban.
And it was in Barcelona because we were in the church, we were in the plaza in front of the church where the Ramban's disputation occurred. So that was in Barcelona.
Barcelona.
There's a little museum.
Ramban is from Girona, along with Rabbeinu Yonah. So when you go to the Ramban's, there's his birthplace, that's in Girona. But eventually, the disputation that he had with the Pablo Cristiani was in Barcelona.
What's in Barcelona?
And you can
There's actually a little museum. We were in Girona on a
Right.
tour, and
Yes.
they took us to see, where he lived.
Yes,
I know.
yes, that's where he was born. Now, Yud Beis. Vayeda David ki achino Hashem lemelech al Yisrael. David understood by his success that Hashem had prepared him to be the melech. V'chi nisa mamlachto ba'avur amo Yisrael. And his kingdom was rising in order to benefit Klal Yisrael. Now here, Rashi says, "Biroto kol masav matzlichim umalchei ha'umot sholchim lo mincha." He now sees neighboring kings sending gifts. This is all happening because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is behind him. Not only that, say the Meforshim. Mistama hayta kana chana David HaMelech alav hashalom lizman sheyeh melech HaMashiach. That this is a preparation. Who is Mashiach? Mashiach ben David. The same thing that's happening to David is going to happen to Melech HaMashiach. Shekol hagoyim yavov yichkanu lefanav. The goyim will come in front of the Mashiach. V'yikablu et malchuto aleihem. That's what it means. V'chinisa mamlachto. This is a parsha that is speaking of Melech HaMashiach. Then the Mishpat Zozav says like this: Efshar lomar yotar, she'ilu haya David omed b'nisayon. If David HaMelech had withstood the test of Bathsheba, we're going to learn about the Maaseh of Bathsheba, where he caused Bathsheba's husband Uriah Hitti, right, to be killed, so he could take her as a wife. If he was not nichshal there, hayabaha olam miyad al tikuno. The world would have reached its corrective position. V'haita gula shlema shetiyeh mirz Hashem in the future. V'haya David kvar melech HaMashiach. And David would have been melech HaMashiach. Usvar yesh position hayomed b'nisayon hayomrim elokei David. V'imkach mistam haita gula shlema. Shekvar haita kviya lemida zu anikred elokei David, not just elokei Avraham, elokei Yitzchak, elokei Yaakov. Shekiven shechata b'mashaya pagam chilul Hashem ein achet miskaper b'chayim. Then he says like this: Kvar heveti b'kama mekamot, in his books Masha Shamati me'achi Rav David, B'Shem, Reb Shlomo Volba, right? Reb Shlomo Volbi, Shemelech Italia, Victor Emmanuel, right? In the 1860s, when they put the Italian states together and they made the country Italy, the king was Victor Emmanuel. Sha'al Pamet Rabba Shel Romi. The king Victor Emmanuel asked the king of Rome, the rabbi of Rome, Hine katuv b'chazal shebe'et shemelech HaMashiach yimloch, yoridu kol hamlachim et haktarim shelahem v'yichabdu oto b'hem. All the other kings will remove their crowns to him. So Sha'al Oto, Victor Emmanuel asked this rabbi, what if I decide not to give the Melech HaMashiach my crown? Amar lo harav, Adoni HaMelech, my master the king, if you're not giving him your crown, then he's not really the Melech HaMashiach. Trust me, when the Melech HaMashiach comes, you will remove your crown. I thought that was a very interesting vignette there. Weiter. We were told before that when David was in Hebron, he had 6 wives. And we listed the wives. Now when he comes to Yerushalayim, he takes other pilakshim and wives. And he has children from them. We don't get the names. The Torah allows a king to have 18 wives. And David thought that that's the right thing to do. So he began increasing his wives. We already explained the difference between a wife and a pilegesh. The Meforshim explained that pilegesh doesn't have a ksuba. And we said before, how did he come up? Where do we learn 18? Because in Shmuel Beis later on, it says, I'm going to add to you more and more. At that time, he had 6 wives. So chahena is 6 times 3 is 18. That's how Chazal learned that. Because he had 6 wives when he came to Yerushalayim. Let's see here. Gimel. The Rambam says in Perek Daled Mimalachim, "V'chein lokecha melech mikol gvu Yisrael nashim upilagshim." A king can take wives and pilagshim. Nashim biktuvot v'kiddushin. Wives are with kiddushin and ksuba. Pilagshim below ktuva v'lo kiddushin. The Rambam says it's without ksuba and without kiddushin. Ela biyichud bilvad koneota umuteret lo. Aval hahedyot otzer b'pilegesh. He's miyached her. He designates her for himself. And he's coined to her. But a hedyot, a regular non-king, cannot live with a pilegesh that way. So why does the king have this heter for pilagshim? Yesh lishol. You should ask. It says in the Rambam, "The haboel pnuya below kiddushin loket." Somebody has relations with a single girl in Klal Yisrael, you get malchus. It's malchus midrabanon. Or he says, the Rambam says it's a lav and a Torah, but haboel pnuya below kiddushin is loike. How can the David HaMelech take a pilegesh? The Efshalomar bezed behedyot shaper loikal zemishum lab dikidsha. A regular person gets malchus because he didn't do kiddushin. Mishum de'en lo bas kinyan b'mashin is yachtat. So there's no kinyan by just going in a room alone with her. The Efshal lo lazovoto liyet yachidim acher, and it doesn't create a bond between them. The zeu derech shel znut. That's promiscuity. Aval melech b'mashin yachidim ayesh lo kinyan. Remember, nobody can live with a king's wife except him. So therefore, the ein mishtamshim b'sharvita shel melech. Nobody else can use the scepter of the king. Now, in Yerushalmi, there's a different machlokas. Vezehu isha vezehu pilegesh. Rav Meir omer isha yesh laksuba pilegesh ein laksuba. But according to Rav Meir, a pilegesh would have kiddushin. Rav Yuda omer achazu v'achazu yesh laksuba. Isha yesh laksuba utnai ksuba. So there's the ksuba itself, the 200, the amount of money, and then there's certain conditions in the ksuba. Pilegesh gets the ksuba, but not the tnai ktuba. Tnai ktuba hema ela hadvarim amnuyim b'ktubot, kimo ksuvas b'nin dichrin. If she comes into the marriage, for example, with sons from another marriage, so there's certain financial promises made to those male sons that they get a certain thing that they otherwise wouldn't get. So that's part of the Tanai Ksuba. So we see there's a machlokas exactly how to describe a pilegesh and a regular wife. Yudalit. Elu shmot hayelodim lo b'Yushalayim. Shamua v'shovav v'natanu shlomo. Because we're talking about Bathsheba here as well. Vayivchar v'elish, because remember, ein mugdam u'mucha b'toira. Vayivchar v'elishua v'nefak v'yafia. V'elishama v'yada v'elifelet. By the way, the Rashi in Divrei Yomim shows us that Elifelet died, and David had another son. He named him Elifelet. So he gave the same name to two of his sons. And the Shilas and Shuvas, Divin Nesanel, brings a proof from there that a person can give to two of his sons the same name, even if they're alive. The Tzitz Eliezer brings Rav Chizda, Korlish Bnei Yaakov, Mar Yenuka, and Mar Kshisha. They were both called Mar. One was Mar, an older one was a younger one. Just an interesting tangent here. We don't do it. Our minig, we don't name multiple of our sons the same name.
The Mayamlo also says that the names are actually David HaMelech showing gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with each of the names, because each one refers to such as Elifelet is my God delivered, or Shalomo is peace is his, or Yivkar is he was chosen. All of these things are showing gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah.
What would be the point of naming two children the same name? What would be the point of that?
Well, in David's time, it was because one of his sons died. So when he had another son, he named him the same name.
Yes, I understand that, but you mentioned that you could name two sons who were alive with the same name. What would be the point of that?
Maybe they were naming it after a great ancestor.
A great person.
I'm using the name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's not our. It's a good question. It's not really our minig, so it's hard to answer why people would do that. But it's permitted.
Mm-hmm.
Vayishmu, now, new stage. So all of a sudden, Vayishmu Plishtim, ki mashchu et David lemelech HaYisrael. Listen, the Plishtim has just got finished wiping out Shaul. So the Plishtim are a major military force. So, and they know David. David killed Goliath and wiped the Plishtim out. So the Plishtim are not going to let David sit on his laurels here. They hear that he's been anointed king. Vayalu kol Plishtim levakesh et David, vayishma David vayered el hametzuda. And he goes down to the fortress to, in fact, they thought, the Plishtim, that he had already been anointed by Shmuel. Why did they anoint him again? Some say because they thought that he's being anointed as a Meshuach Milchama. And he's actually, been chosen to go out and do battle. The Tehillim, Mizmor Tehillim Beis, Lama Ragshu Goyim. Why? This is referring to this episode. And all the various psukim, they refer to the gathering of the Plishtim, and David had fear, and how he dealt with it. Plishtim Ba'u, Vayinatshu Be'emek Rephaim. The same Emek Rephaim that we know. Emek Rephaim is, the Burger's Bar. You get Emek Rephaim. It's on the southern entrance to Yerushalayim. And this was a periodic way of forces coming into Yerushalayim from the south, like from Hebron and Beit Lechem. Vayishal David b'Hashem lemor. David is going to ask Hashem, Ha'elel plishtim? Should I do battle now? And then he asks, Hatitnein biadi, will I win? Vayomer Hashem el David, aleh, go up. Ki naton etenet al plishtim biadecha. Now, those of you who've learned with us from the beginning, remember that when you ask from the Urim HaTumim, it says, Ein shoalim shnei dvarim ke'echad. In Yuma, Ayin Gimel, describing how to use the Urim HaTumim, you're not supposed to ask, you're supposed to ask one question at a time. So how the imshal in machzirim el echad. If you did ask two, the Urim HaTumim is going to answer you one. And ein machzir lo rishon, they're going to answer you the first one. And here, David asked two, and he got an answer. So there also, when he fought in Sikleg, if it's Havi Davar Nachutz, if it's like an emergency, Mutar Lishol Shnei Dvarim Ke'echad, and the Urim HaTumim will answer them. And then it's interesting, here it says, Vayishal David b'Hashem. In Divrei Hayomim it says, Vayishal David b'Elokim. And the Meforshim say, because now the Plishtim are coming, maybe it's a Midas Adin. Maybe it's some bad judgment on a certain, on an Aveira that they did. So over there, David was thinking about it. They listed the word Elokim, which always talks about Midas Adin. Pasuk Chaf Vayavod David b'Baal Pratzim. David came to Baal Pratzim. That's the name of the Makom. Vayakem Sham David, he struck them there. Vayomar Paratz Hashem et oivai lefanai keferetz mayim. Hashem broke them open at my enemies like cutting through water. Alkein karashem hamakom ahu Baal Pratzim. They were called that way as well. Now, not sure where I saw that thing. I wanted to comment on it. Okay. Vayazvu sham et atzabeyam. The Plishtim left their idols. Vayisaem David vanashav. David and his people carried them away. Now in Divrei Hayomim, the same pasuk says Vayisrifu ba'esh, they burnt it. So what did they do? Did they carry it or did they burn it? So in Masechta Avodah Zarah, Mem Daled Amud Aleph, Rav Huna Rami, Rav Huna showed a stira. Ksiv b'divrei Hayomim vayomer David vayisrufu ba'esh. One place it says David burnt them, and then in Shmuel it says vayisaim lo kasha, kan koidem sheba'iti agiti, kan la'achar sheba'iti agiti. Iti agiti is a plishti who, when he saw that the Plishtim were destroyed by David, joined David HaMelech. And when you have an idol, has to be destroyed, that's owned by a goy, has to be destroyed by another goy. So a Jew cannot be mevatel the koach of Avodah Zarah. Only that one that worships him can. So when Iti Agiti came, he abolished that Avodah Zarah. Then they could use it and carry it away and benefit from it. Once it's bottle, you can have, it's mutter bano. Now, can you force an idolater to mevatel? So, machlokes. Rabbi Elazar HaKafir, the Gemara says, goy mevatel avodah zarah filu bal korcha. He can do it even if you force him to do it. But a bias is no, only if it sort of got ruined on its own. Now, if an avodah zarah arm is cut off, then even a Jew can be mevatel such an avodah zarah, because basically it couldn't even protect itself. Some say there's a chiluk between idols made out of wood and idols made out of metal. That's another way they're metarates one place versus the other. That only an idol of wood can you force an idolater to mevatel it, but not a mateches. That he has to do out of his own free will. Now, they also bring Yaakov Avinu, if you remember, he buried all the idols that the family had before they went into Eretz Yisrael. And how come David didn't do the same thing? So the Ramban explains that there the Anshe Shechem were Mavatul. But Yaakov Avinu anyways didn't want to bring it to Eretz Yisrael. So how come David HaMelech took it for himself? Because by Yaakov Avinu, the bittul by the people of Shechem was against their will. Even though it worked, that's still a shtickle avodah zarah. But here, Iti Agiti came and abolished it from his own free will. So it works even for metal idolaters. So there's no problem for David HaMelech to keep it. Now the Plishtim weren't finished. Chav Beis, vayasifu ad Plishtim la'alot vaynatshu be'emek Rephaim. They settled again in Emek Rephaim. By the way, you notice they keep on coming back for more. They even though they were beaten, they try again. Some of the Meforshim see the current Palestinian situation. They're like descendants of the Plishtim. You see the same thing. It's not just to be victorious. It's just to cause them pain. It's just to shepherd with them. Pasuk Chav Gimel Vayishal David B'Hashem. Again, he asked the Urim V'Tubim, Vayomer lo ta'aleh. Hashem says, don't go. Don't go frontwards. Hasev elacharem, go behind them. Uvata lahem imul b'chaim. There's these mastic tricks, trees. These are certain kind of trees that are behind them. I want you to go that way. So some say, the Kilas Yaakov says that he didn't allow them to go direct in battle because, David, when he said, Poratz Hashem es oivai biyadi, it sounds a little bit like he was giving some of the victory into his own hands. So now Hashem has to show him, no, the Yeshua has to come only from Hashem. And instead of being an act of nace, it's going to be derech hateva. How do you normally do battle? You go and sneak. So now they were forced to do it derech hateva, and there's no need for a nace. And Hashem gives them a signal. When you hear the trees blowing, then jump on them. That's going to be the signal that the Plishtim's downfall is going to come. And again, David was successful in their battle against the Plishtim. Yes, Bernie. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, there was these trees, these baka trees, the fact that they were rustling and making noise and the wind blew through them was a way for the David's army to advance without being detected.
Right, because they're behind them too.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, next week is a fantastic. We move into a famous perek, which is one of our haftarot, about bringing the Aron HaKodesh to Yerushalayim. So, any comments, questions, ha'aros about anything we learned tonight? I think we covered a lot of things tonight.
You can really see a difference between David and Shaul in this parak. They have such different ways of approaching.
Excellent, Ella. By the way, I didn't go through. David listened exactly to the words of Hashem about timing. Remember, Shaul was told, wait for me by Shmuel 7 days. And he didn't wait. So here, David waited even, I didn't go through the Medrash, but they were 4 Amos. The Plishtim were right in front of them. And David was told, wait until I give you the signal by Hashem. He waited. And the Meforshim show the difference between David and Shaul on that midah of having complete faith and following exactly what Hashem says. So thank you for pointing that out, Ellen.
Sure.
Okay, looking forward next week again.
Go ahead, Bernie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay,
Have a
thank
great
you, Bernie.
week. Great
Thank
week,
you.
everyone.
Have a good week.
Good week,
Thank you.
good Chodesh.
Chodesh.